Okay, so you're driving down the street, right? And like, what do you see? It's Prius on the left, a CRV hybrid on the right. It seems like everyone and their brother is going hybrid these days.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy out there.
I mean, it really does seem like every other car on the road now has one of those fuel-sipping battery-assisted engines.
Yeah, it's true. Hybrid sales are absolutely booming right now.
Yeah. But it makes you wonder, though, right? Like, are these hybrids actually a stepping stone to a fully electric future, or are they just delaying the inevitable? Are we like clinging to our old DVD players while everyone else is like streaming online?
Hmm, that's a great way to put it. The article we're diving into today actually makes a really similar comparison. It talks about range anxiety being this major factor that's driving people to buy hybrids. Like people are hesitant to go all electric because they're afraid they'll run out of charge on a long trip.
Right, right, that dreaded range anxiety. But I mean, is that fear really justified anymore? I mean, EVs are getting better with every new model year,
Yeah,
right?
they're definitely improving. But that range anxiety thing is like this powerful psychological barrier.
Yeah,
You know, it taps into our deep-seated need for security and control.
totally.
I mean, think about it. Your smartphone probably has a battery life that's way shorter than most EVs can travel on a single charge, right?
Hmm.
But I bet you probably charge your phone way more often out of like habit and fear of that low battery notification than like actual necessity,
Oh yeah, for sure.
you know? And it's kind of the same thing with these vehicles, that fear of being stranded is a really strong motivator.
Yeah, I get it. We're creatures of habit, right? But then the question becomes, if hybrids are booming because people are afraid of going fully electric, will they actually slow down EV adoption? Or is this more like a stepping stone effect?
That is the million-dollar question.
Mm.
And to really understand the answer, we've got to like dig a little deeper into the economics of car production, specifically something called Wright's Law. Have you ever heard of that?
I can't say that I have. It sounds kind of intense, like some kind of automotive legal battle.
Sauce. Not quite. It's actually an economic principle that's been around for over a century. Basically, it states that for every time the cumulative production of something doubles, the cost to produce it drops by a certain percentage. Think about it like this. The first time you bake a cake, it's probably a mess, right? You burn the edges, the frosting is messed up.
Mm.
It takes forever, and you're not even sure if you did it right. But then, like, the more cakes you bake, the more efficient you become. The cost in time and wasted ingredients goes down
Yeah.
because you're learning and, like, refining the process.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing the connection here. So more cars produced equals lower costs.
Exactly. And this law is held true for everything from cars to computers. In the automotive industry, we typically see a cost reduction of about 15% for every doubling in production. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Hit me with it.
When we zero in on electric vehicle batteries specifically, that cost reduction is even more dramatic. We're talking closer to 20% with every doubling of production.
Wow, that's huge. Why is that?
Well, it's because this whole battery technology is still relatively new and it's rapidly evolving. There's a lot of room for improvement and optimization, which translates to faster cost reductions.
So basically, the more EVs we build, the cheaper those batteries become, and then the more affordable EVs become overall. It's like a snowball effect. Okay, so then where do hybrids fit into all of this?
Well, that's where the article points out a pretty critical difference between hybrids and EVs. While hybrids might seem like a bridge technology, they're actually way more complex to manufacture. You got to remember, they have two engines, a gasoline engine and an electric motor.
Right.
And that means more parts, more engineering, and ultimately higher production costs.
So are you saying they might not benefit as much from these cost reductions as EVs?
Precisely. And this is a major factor to consider when we're talking about the long-term viability of hybrids.
Mm.
It's like those old combo VHS DVD players.
Oh man, I remember those. What a relic of a bygone era.
Exactly. They were trying to bridge the gap between two technologies, but they ultimately couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, will hybrids face a similar fate?
That is an interesting question. All right, so we've got this potential cost issue for hybrids, but something else I was curious about, the article also mentions some differences in how quickly EVs are being adopted around the world. What's going on there?
Yeah, you're right. The global landscape is really interesting when it comes to EV adoption. The article highlights Europe and China as like the front runners.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're leaving the US in the dust.
Okay, so what are they doing differently over there? What's the secret sauce? What can we learn from their approach?
Well, a lot of it boils down to government incentives and infrastructure. European and Chinese governments have been way more proactive in promoting EVs
How so?
through subsidies, tax breaks, and stricter emission standards. They're really putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if it's cheaper to buy and own an EV, people are obviously more likely to make the switch. But what about the whole charging infrastructure thing? What's the situation there?
Yeah, that's another key factor. Both Europe and China have been investing a ton of money in building up that charging infrastructure, so it makes it much easier for EV owners to, fuel up.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had to drive around for an hour just to find a gas station. You probably wouldn't be too keen on driving a gas-powered car.
Not a chance. Convenience is king. But hold on. Doesn't the US have those Tesla superchargers and other charging networks popping up everywhere? It's not like we're living in the dark ages over here.
True. Tesla has definitely made some big strides, and yeah, there are other charging networks emerging. But the article points out that the U.S. is still lagging behind in terms of the overall availability and accessibility of chargers, especially when you get out into those rural areas.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a real barrier for people who live outside of major cities or, frequently take long road trips.
For sure. And I imagine cheaper gas prices in the US probably don't help much either. If filling up your gas tank isn't breaking the bank, there's not as much incentive to switch to electric, right?
Exactly.
Right.
The article mentions that too. It's another factor slowing down EV adoption here. When gas is relatively cheap, it just makes that switch to electric less compelling, even if EVs would save you money in the long run.
Mm.
It's that classic short-term thinking versus long-term thinking thing.
It's so true. It's interesting, though, because the article throws in another curveball. It mentions car dealerships as a potential roadblock. What's the deal with that? I thought they were all about selling us cars, whatever that kind.
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. A lot of these traditional dealerships, especially here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
make a big chunk of their profits from servicing gasoline-powered cars. Oil changes, engine tune-ups, that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's where they make their real money. EVs, with their simpler electric drivetrains, require far less maintenance.
Wow, I never even thought about it that way. So you're saying some dealerships might be hesitant to go all in on EVs if it means cutting into their own profit?
Exactly. It's a complex issue. There are definitely economic factors at play.
For sure. So with all of this in mind, the cost issues for hybrids, those different rates of EV adoption around the world, and even the whole car dealership situation, it kind of makes me wonder, are we saying hybrids are doomed? Like, is this a VHS DVD player situation all over again?
Well, the article seems to suggest that hybrids are probably a short-term solution. As battery technology keeps improving, that range anxiety thing will become less of an issue, And as governments around the world push for cleaner energy and EV adoption becomes more widespread, those cost advantages will just keep getting bigger.
So are we like saying sayonara to hybrids then? Should we all be telling our Priuses to start updating their resumes?
Well, I wouldn't say extinct necessarily,
Okay.
but yeah, their market share is definitely going to shrink
Yeah.
as EVs become more dominant. Remember that comparison the article made about hybrids being like those combo VHS DVD players?
Yeah.
They served a purpose for a little while, but in the end, they were really just bridging the gap between two technologies.
A bridge to a future powered by electricity. But if that's the case, what's it going to take for EVs to really take off here in the US? Like, what needs to change? And what do you think? We want to hear from you. Hit us up on social media and let us know your thoughts. Do you think EVs are the future? Or are hybrids here to stay?
As we've been kind of diving into this whole thing, it really strikes me that the future of transportation isn't just about the cars themselves,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. It's about how consumers see things, it's government policies, these economic forces at play. It's really like this whole ecosystem of factors, and they all sort of determine how fast these new technologies get adopted.
For sure. And this article made it super clear that the U.S. is on a totally different page than Europe and China when it comes to EVs.
Hmm.
So what would you say are the biggest things we need to tackle here in the U.S. to get people to switch over to EVs faster?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right. Based on the article and just like what we know in general, I'd say there are a few key areas to focus on. First off, we got to keep expanding that charging infrastructure, especially in those rural areas that are underserved.
Right. Makes sense.
And second, yeah, we do have financial incentives in place already, but we might need to consider some more aggressive policies, like maybe stricter emission standards or higher taxes on gasoline to really incentivize those consumers to make the switch.
Yeah. It seems like there's a real chance here for the U.S. to learn from what's worked and even what hasn't worked so well, as Europe and China have gone all in on electric vehicles.
Yeah, totally. It's not about copying their playbook exactly, but it's more about understanding why they've been successful and seeing how we can adapt those things to the U.S. market.
Right. One last thing from the article that I thought was interesting was that part about hybrids being like those combo VHS DVD players. It's funny, but it really makes you think.
It really does. It points out something crucial about these bridging technologies.
What's that?
They can be useful in the short term to help us transition from the old to the new, but they usually don't last forever. Think about those old flip phones we used to have. They were the bridge between landlines and smartphones. But in the end, nobody uses them anymore because smartphones got so much better.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. So the question is, are hybrids going to go the same way? Or will they figure out a way to adapt and stick around? It's hard to say for sure. But there's one thing that's for certain. It's that the future of getting around is electric. Whether hybrids fade out little by little or find a way to exist alongside fully electric cars, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But this is a really exciting time to be paying attention to the world of transportation.
It really is. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into hybrids and EVs. We hope you learned a thing or two and that this has given you some food for thought as you navigate, well, the road ahead. And hey, who knows, maybe someday soon we'll all be sitting around reminiscing about the days when we used to freak out about range anxiety and hunting down a charging station.
No.
Until then, keep those engines hunting, or I guess I should say those batteries charged.